Sometime in the early 1920s, a flour company worked out that women were cutting up its empty sacks and sewing dresses out of them. They could have switched to tougher paper and put a stop to it. Instead, they hired textile designers out of New York and Europe, printed the bags in color-fast patterns women would actually want, and started using paper labels and temporary inks that soaked clean off so a woman got the full yardage out of it. By 1925, you could buy flour in red and white check. By 1933, the bag manufacturers were publishing a sewing pattern booklet to go with it. That's how relentless these households were about getting something out of nothing. They were so good at it that an entire industry reorganized itself around their thrift. Now, I did not do most of what's on this list. I watched it get done. This was my mother's work and my grandmother's before her, and I was the boy hauling the water and splitting the wood that heated it. What I can tell you is the order they did things in and why, because I stood in that kitchen 20 years and paid attention. Here's the twist. Number 25 doesn't clean anything at all. It's a pure optical trick, and it beats bleach. Number 12 is the one everybody swears by, and a study found it quits working after about 3 years. And number 1 was the most valuable object in the house, and most families threw theirs out without ever knowing what they had. These aren't hacks. This was a household economy run by people with no money and no waste, and almost every one of these still works. Before we start, hit subscribe. Let's count down 35 household tricks only mountain women knew. Number 35, the grease can. A coffee can sat on the back of every mountain stove, and every bit of fat that came out of a skillet went into it through a scrap of cloth to strain the crumbs out. That was the cooking fat for the week. Cornbread, fried apples, killed lettuce, the start of every gravy. Lard at the store cost real money. A family up a holler did not have to spare. And there sat the same thing on the stove for nothing. Pappy never bought shortening in his life because there was no reason on earth to. The trick is straining it while it's still hot and liquid. Let it set with the brown bits still in it, and those bits go rancid first, and they take the whole can with them. Strained clean and kept covered, it holds for months. Number 34. Nothing goes stale, it goes into something else. Bread heels never got thrown out. They went 3 directions, depending on how far gone they were. Day old went to crumbs, dried hard on the back of the stove, and rolled fine for coating meat or topping a casserole. 2 or 3 days old went into dressing, or into a bread pudding with milk and eggs and whatever sweetening was in the house. Truly hard went into the chicken bucket. There was no category called garbage. There was a sequence, and every stage of staleness had a destination already assigned to it. Number 33. Sour milk is an ingredient. Milk turning was not a problem. It was Tuesday's biscuits. Sour milk and buttermilk carry lactic acid, and acid plus baking soda is what makes a biscuit rise. That's the reaction. The acid and the soda produce carbon dioxide, and the gas is what lifts the dough. Sweet milk with soda alone does almost nothing, which is why the old recipes call for buttermilk and soda, while modern ones call for sweet milk and baking powder. Baking powder is just soda with a dry acid already mixed in. The mountain kitchen supplied the acid itself for free by letting milk do what milk does. Number 32. Potato water. When potatoes came off the stove, the water didn't go out the door. It went into the bread. Potato water carries dissolved starch, and that starch feeds yeast harder than plain water does, so the dough rises faster and higher. It also holds moisture, so the loaf stays soft 2 days longer. Cool it to lukewarm first. Pour it hot into your yeast, and you've killed the yeast, and you'll be waiting on a dough that never moves. Number 31. The stock pot. Every bone, every trimming, every onion skin and carrot end and celery butt went into a pot on the back of the stove with water and stayed there. Simmer bones long enough and the collagen breaks down into gelatin, which is why proper stock sets up like jelly when it cools. That's the test. If it's still watery cold, it didn't cook long enough or there wasn't enough joint in it. One chicken fed a family twice, once as meat and again as the broth that carried a pot of dumplings. Number 30. Eggshells in the coffee pot. Crushed eggshell went in with the grounds, and it wasn't superstition. Coffee is acidic, and calcium carbonate, which is what an eggshell is, neutralizes acid. It knocks the bitter edge off a pot that's been sitting, and it helps the grounds clump and settle instead of floating in your cup. That mattered a right smart when you were boiling coffee in a pot rather than running it through a filter, and when the coffee itself had likely been on the stove since before daylight. Number 29. Coffee stretched with chicory. Coffee was store-bought, and store-bought meant cash money, so it got stretched. Chicory root, dug, dried, roasted dark, and ground in with the beans. It doesn't taste like coffee. It tastes like something darker and rounder with no caffeine in it, and a family that mixed it half and half doubled how long a pound lasted. Roast it too dark, and it goes bitter and acrid and runs the whole pot. The color you want is a deep chestnut, not black. Number 28. Cast iron never touched soap. A seasoned skillet with hot water and a stiff brush. Dried immediately on a stove eye and rubbed with a trace of grease while it was still warm. That's not superstition, it's just what soap does. Seasoning is fat cooked hard onto the iron, and soap's whole job in this world is breaking fat down. Wash a skillet with it, and you've taken the seasoning off, and you're starting over with a pan that sticks and rusts. And the drying is not optional. Air dry a cast iron skillet in a damp mountain kitchen, and you'll have orange spots by morning. Number 27. Salt on a scorch. Something burned onto the bottom of a pan, got a heavy layer of salt and a little water, brought back to a simmer, and then scraped. Salt is grit that melts, and that is a useful thing to have. It's coarse enough to lift the burn off iron, and then it rinses away to nothing, where sand would scratch and stay. Same trick on a stained cup or a cutting board. Salt and half a lemon, if there was a lemon in the house. That's the kitchen. Now the laundry, which was the hardest full day of work in the week, and where the cleverest tricks in the house lived. Number 26. Wood ash was the store. Hardwood ashes saved all winter did 3 jobs. Leached with water through a hopper, they gave you lye, and lye plus rendered fat gave you soap. Mixed to a paste, they scoured pots. Sprinkled dry, they took grease out of a hearthstone or a plank floor. That's cleaning supplies, degreaser and scouring powder out of the thing that was left in the fireplace every morning. Free, endless, and it kept. Hardwood only. Pine ash carries resin, and it will not make usable lye. Number 25. Bluing. Here's the one that sounds like nonsense and is actually optics. White cotton yellows with age and washing, and my mother would not have it. So a few drops of bluing went in the rinse water, and the cloth came out of that tub bright white. It doesn't clean anything. It doesn't bleach anything. Bluing deposits an extremely fine suspension of Prussian blue across the fabric, and blue sits directly opposite yellow. The blue absorbs the yellow wavelengths the cloth would have reflected, so what comes back to your eye is balanced, and your brain reads balanced as white. Pure optical correction, done in 1890, and it works better on old cotton than bleach does, because bleach attacks the fiber, and bluing only fools the eye. One morning, it works on cotton and linen and rayon. On polyester and nylon, it does next to nothing because there is nothing on those fibers for it to hold to. Number 24. Sun bleaching on the grass. Whites came out of the rinse and went straight out onto the grass in full sun, still wet, not on the line, on the ground. Sunlight breaks down the compounds that cause stains and yellowing, and wet cloth holds the reaction against the fiber longer. The grass matters too, or at least old-timers swore it did. This is free bleach that never weakens the cloth. A bleached out sheet is a sheet you'll be replacing in 2 years. A sun-bleached sheet outlasts you. Do it with colors and you'll fade them to nothing, which is why colors dried in the shade or under the porch. Number 23, starch out of the potato pot. The same potato water, reduced down, was laundry starch. Boil it to concentrate the starch, thin it to the stiffness you wanted, dip collars and cuffs and aprons, and iron them damp. A starched collar holds its shape and, more usefully, sheds dirt because the grime sets in the starch rather than the cloth and comes out with the next wash. Too heavy a mix and the cloth goes board stiff and cracks at the fold. That's how a collar wears out at the crease. Number 22, newspaper on the windows. Wadded newspaper and vinegar water. No rag. Cloth leaves lint and pushes the dirt around. Newsprint is slightly abrasive. It holds almost no water so it doesn't streak, and it takes the last film off the glass better than anything in the house. Worth knowing that modern newsprint is a different animal. Today's ink and paper can smear where the old stuff didn't. If you try it, test a corner first. Number 21. Cornmeal lifts grease. Grease spilled on a plank floor or a wool coat got a heavy dusting of dry cornmeal. Left an hour, then brushed off. Cornmeal is dry and porous, and it wicks oil up out of the fiber by capillary action, same as sawdust on a shop floor. And it's part of why there was always a poke of meal within reach of the stove. The failure is rubbing it in. Dust it on, leave it alone, brush it off with the grain. Number 20, vinegar for everything that had scale on it. Kettles, jars, windows, the inside of a churn. Vinegar is acid and scale is the opposite, so the one eats the other. That's all it is. And a gallon of vinegar costs next to nothing, or nothing at all if you had cider going sour. Never on marble or on cast iron seasoning. The acid eats the stone and strips the pan. Number 19, sand and ash for scouring. Before anybody sold a scouring powder, a mix of fine sand and wood ash on a wet rag cleaned iron, wood, tin, and stone. The sand does the cutting, and the ash cuts the grease. And between them, they'll clean anything in a house. The women on our creek scoured their plank tables down to near white with it every Saturday. Not on anything painted or glazed. It will go straight through the finish. Number 18, the washing order. 1 tub of hot water had to do the whole family, and I was the one carrying it. So believe me when I tell you the order was fixed and there was no arguing about it. Whites first, in the hottest, cleanest water. Then light colors. Then everyday work clothes. Then the filthiest, greasiest things last, in water that by then was gray and cooling. Wash them out of order, and you've moved the dirt from the barn breeches into the baby's gown. That single rule saved carrying and heating water 3 separate times, and heating water meant splitting wood. Now cloth, and this is where a family's real money went, because everything you wore had to be bought or made. Number 17, feed sack fabric. Back to the flour bags. A 100-pound cotton sack, opened at the seam and washed, gave you close to a yard of good cotton. 3 or 4 matching sacks made a dress. Feed store customers learned to buy their flour by the pattern, and a woman would send her husband back to the store to get the 4th bag in the print she needed. The companies leaned all the way in. Percy Kent hired designers out of Europe and New York and printed with color-fast dyes. The Textile Bag Manufacturers Association put out a booklet of patterns in 1933. When cotton went short in the Second World War, the whole thing came roaring back, and the Smithsonian holds a feed sack dress made as late as 1959. My mother made me 2 shirts and my sister a Sunday dress out of the same 4 sacks of flour, and the flour got 8 either way. That's a dress and 2 shirts for nothing, setting inside something you were buying regardless. Number 16, turning collars and cuffs. A man's shirt wears out at 2 places long before the rest of it goes, the collar and the cuff edges, because that's where skin and friction are. So she unpicked the collar, turned it over, and sewed it back on with the worn edge tucked under and the good edge showing. Cuffs the same way. That's 2 full lives out of one shirt, and it took her maybe 20 minutes at the table after supper. The signal was the shine. When a collar started to gloss, that was the time. Wait for the fray and you've missed it, because now there's nothing left to turn. Number 15, darning over a wooden egg. Socks got darned, not replaced, and the tool was a smooth wooden egg or a burnt-out light bulb slipped inside the sock to hold the hole open in the right shape. The stitch runs in 2 directions. First, a set of parallel threads across the hole to bridge it, then a second set woven through the first at right angles. What you've made is new cloth, not a pull-together pucker. Pull the edges together instead of weaving, and you get a hard knot that rubs a blister and blows out again inside a week. The last woman on our creek who could darn a heel so you couldn't feel it was my aunt, and she's been in the ground since 1981. I've got a pair of her socks in a drawer, and I cannot find a mend with my thumb. Number 14, rag rugs. Clothing too far gone to patch got cut into strips and became floor covering. Braided, hooked, or woven, depending on what the house had. That's the last stage of a long chain. Dress to work dress to apron, apron to quilt scrap, scrap to rag rug, rug to the rag bag. A piece of cotton did 5 jobs in 20 years before anybody let go of it. Cut on the bias if you're braiding. Straight cut strips fray apart at the edges as they wear. Number 13, quilts out of the scrap bag. Quilting was not a hobby in a mountain house. It was how you got bedding. String quilts are the purest version. Narrow leftover strips, too small for anything else, sewn onto a paper or cloth foundation until they made a block. No plan, no matching, no bought fabric anywhere in it. 3 layers, top and batting and back, and that stitching is doing work. It holds the batting from shifting down into a lump at the foot of the bed. That's why the lines run close together, not because it's pretty. There were 4 women in this holler who could set a quilt properly when I was a boy. There are none now. Number 12, the cedar chest. Now the one worth correcting, because nearly everybody has this half wrong. Wool went into a cedar chest to keep the moths out, and everybody will tell you cedar stops moths. What the research actually says is narrower than that, and it does not flatter the story. Cedar oil at real concentration does work. A 2017 study found 1% cedar oil killed clothes moth larvae and stopped eggs from hatching, and cedar chips cut adult moth lifespan roughly in half. But a new chest kills only the smallest larvae. It does not kill larger larvae, eggs, or pupae. It does not repel adult moths at all. And here's the part that matters most. A cedar chest more than about 3 years old is practically useless for killing anything, because the oil that does the work has gone off out of the surface. So the tradition was real, and the mechanism was real, and then it quietly stopped being true in every chest in America without anybody noticing. What still works? Light sanding. Take the surface back, you expose fresh oil and restore the scent. And raw cedar blocks need doing every 3 to 6 months. And never put already infested wool in there, because you've just given the larvae a dark, quiet box to finish the job in. Number 11, patch before the hole. The rule was that you patched at the thin place, not at the tear. Once cloth actually opens, there's nothing strong left around the edge to sew a patch to, so the patch pulls out and takes more cloth with it. Catch it while it's just worn thin and you're stitching into sound fabric on all 4 sides. Elbows, knees, seat, and the point of the shoulder where a strap sat. Those 4 spots got watched. Heat and light next, and these are the ones people will actually use the next time the power goes out. Number 10. Banking the fire. Nobody built a fire of a morning if they could help it. Matches cost money, and kindling cost daylight. So the last thing at night, you raked the coals into a heap and covered them over with a layer of ash. Ash holds heat in and air out, and it stars those coals down to a slow smolder without letting them die. In the morning, you rake the ash back, drop on fine kindling, and blow. 12 hours later, there is still live fire in there. Pappy could do it in the dark without waking anybody. Too little ash and it burns through and dies. Too much and you smother it. About 2 inches, and you learn the exact amount for your own fireplace by getting it wrong a few times. Number 9, a hot rock in the bed. Soapstone or a plain flat creek rock or a brick sat by the fire all evening, got wrapped in wool or a scrap of quilt, and went to the foot of the bed 20 minutes before anybody got in it. Stone holds heat far longer than water does and gives it off slowly, and soapstone is the best of the common ones for it. A good rock stayed warm most of the night. Wrap it properly or you'll scorch the bedding, and there are plenty of quilts in these mountains with a brown rectangle burned into the bottom of them. Number 8, quilts on the windows and a snake at the door. Single pane glass in a mountain winter is a hole in the wall, so an old quilt went over the window at dark and came down in the morning to let the light in. At the base of every outside door lay a draft snake, a stuffed cloth tube. Both of these are just stopping air movement, which is where nearly all the heat in a drafty house was going. Pappy's house had no insulation in the walls at all. What it had was cloth in every gap, put there at dusk and taken down at daylight every single day of the winter. Number 7, the lamp reflector. A kerosene lamp puts light in every direction, and half of it goes into the wall behind it and is wasted. So the lamp set in front of a mirror or a polished tin plate or a piece of white paper tacked up reflected the wasted half back into the room, and it near enough doubled the useful light off the same amount of oil. The good ones went further and set the lamp in front of a window at night so the glass reflected too. Same lamp, same oil, twice the work out of it. Number 6, that lamps and rush lights. When there was no kerosene money at all, light came out of the same grease can. A shallow dish of rendered fat with a twisted rag laid in it as a wick burns for hours. Better still is a rush light, a length of soft rush with the outer skin peeled away, soaked in fat, laid at an angle in a holder. Cheap, dim, and smoky, but it was light. The trick is the wick has to lie mostly flat rather than stand up. Stand it up and the whole thing wicks too fast, flares, and burns out in minutes. Number 5, soap on anything that binds. A stuck drawer got a bar of soap rubbed on the runners. A screw going into hard oak got its threads dragged across soap first. Soap is a dry lubricant that doesn't stain wood or go rancid the way animal fat does. On a screw, it cuts the friction enough that the head won't strip and the wood won't split. Same bar, kept in the toolbox, lasted years. Number 4, nails got straightened. Nails were bought and they were not cheap. So a pulled nail went into a can and on a rainy day onto a flat rock or an anvil with a hammer to be straightened out. That was my job, sitting out of the weather with a hammer and a coffee can, and it was real money. Enough straightened nails to shingle a shed was close to a day's wages saved, and a family in a holler felt a day's wages. Number 3, newspaper in the walls. When people stripped old mountain houses for renovation, they kept finding the same thing, layers of newspaper, pasted or stuffed into the walls, and under the floorboards, and around the window frames. It was insulation. Paper holds air in the fibers and in the gaps between sheets, and held still air is the whole of what insulation is. It's nothing next to what you can buy now, but it is a sight better than an empty wall, and it costs nothing but paper you'd already read. There's a second thing about it that nobody planned. Those papers are dated. Pull a wall in a 120-year-old house in these mountains, and you can read the week it was built, and the price of hogs, and who died. A family insulated the house and accidentally left an archive in it. Number 2, the button jar and the ball of string. Every house had both, and they were not clutter. Nothing got thrown away with a fastener still on it. Buttons came off before the cloth went to rags. and they went in a jar. And the jar was where you went when something needed a button. Pappy's was a mason jar with a rusted ring, and it sat on the same shelf for 50 years. Same with string, wound into a single growing ball, every usable length added to it. You've likely seen your family's jar. It's the most ordinary thing in an old mountain house, and it's as good a record as you'll ever find of a household that couldn't replace anything and so kept everything that still had a job left in it. Number 1, the receipt book. The most valuable thing in the house was not the rifle, and it was not the clock. It was a hand-bound book, or sometimes a store ledger with the columns ignored, and in it went everything the family had worked out that was worth keeping. Recipes, though they were called receipts, remedies and the doses, dye formulas, and what to use as a mordant, how long to smoke a ham and at what temperature, which apple kept till March, what to do for a cow that wouldn't take the bull. It grew across generations in 3 or 4 different hands, and the later hands corrected the earlier ones. Somebody's grandmother wrote a receipt down, and somebody's mother wrote too much salt in the margin next to it 40 years later. That book was everything the house knew how to do in one object, and there was one copy of it in the world. My mother's sat on the shelf over the flower bin. I can tell you what the cover looked like, and I could not tell you where it went. And when the old people died and the house got cleaned out, the furniture went to family, and the tools went to auction, and an unmarked, handwritten book full of somebody's spidery cursive went into the burn pile, because nobody looking at it recognized what it was. That's what actually got lost, not the tricks. The tricks are recoverable, and 34 of them are in this video. What went was the specific book that held Pappy's family's own particular version with the corrections in the margin, and there is no getting that back. Here's my challenge. Pick one, just one. Put a can on the back of the stove and strain your bacon grease into it. Turn a collar instead of buying a shirt. Bank a fire tonight and see if you've still got coals at 6 in the morning. Then tell me in the comments, and I want something specific this time. Does your family still have the book, a receipt book, a ledger, a school notebook with recipes in the back? Anything in a dead relative's handwriting. Tell me what county it came out of, and tell me one thing that's written in it. Because none of this was thrift for its own sake. It was a household that had decided nothing was allowed to be wasted, and then held that line for 100 years, and got very good at it. They knew. Now it's written down.